The sound of a ceramic bowl shattering on the floor, the entire dining room goes dead silent. Patricia, hand just lowered, voice calm to the point of chilling. You have been rude tonight. To our guest, to this family. Claire, palm pressed against her burning cheek, eyes locked on her husband, voice barely holding. Garrett, your mother just hit me. Garrett, standing frozen, wine glass still in hand, not moving a single step. You provoked her. At the far end of the table, Amber, Garrett's mistress, calmly takes a sip of wine as if nothing happened. Claire, hand tightening over her 8-month belly, voice on the edge of breaking. You were standing right there. One step away, just one. 3 days later, Maxwell Hartwell, billionaire, walks straight through the Weston's front door. Maxwell, voice completely level, eyes cold and razor-sharp, Mrs. Weston, I think it's time you heard a few things clearly before this goes any further. A woman 8 months pregnant was struck at her in-laws' dinner table while her husband stood there and watched. The person sitting most comfortably in that room was his mistress. And no one expected any consequences until her billionaire brother walked in and decided to end the whole game. The full story is right below. Read to the end to find out what Claire did next and what Patricia was finally forced to face. Follow so you never miss what comes next. The sound cut through the room like nothing Claire had ever heard before. Sharp, flat, final. 1 second, she was holding a ceramic bowl of cranberry sauce, trying to be helpful the way she always tried to be helpful. The next second, Patricia Weston's palm connected with her left cheek. The bowl hit the hardwood floor first. Deep red spread across white. The cranberry sauce bled outward in slow, lazy arcs across Patricia's Italian rug, the one she had imported from Florence, the one nobody was allowed to walk on with shoes. Now it was ruined, and Claire's cheek was on fire, and nobody in the room was breathing. She pressed her palm to her face, her skin burned beneath her fingers. She could feel her own pulse there. Fast, shocked, confused. The dining room smelled like roasted turkey and those expensive candles Patricia always burned. French labels, glass jars, something floral that Claire had never been able to identify. 3 of them sat clustered in the center of the table, throwing soft golden light across every face. Harold Weston sat at the head of the table, fork still raised halfway to his mouth, completely frozen. Aunt Renata had both hands pressed flat against her chest, and at the far end of the table, dressed in a green wrap dress that was perhaps one size too small, sat Amber Cole. Amber was watching Claire, not with guilt, not with horror, with something harder to name. Something that lived in the space between those two things. Garrett stood 3 feet away. He had a glass of red wine in his right hand. He did not move. That was the thing Claire would carry with her, long after the sting faded from her cheek, long after everything else. She would remember the 3 feet. She would remember the wine glass. She would remember that her husband stood close enough to reach her in 1 step and chose not to take it. 3 feet. 1 step and not take it. He did not take it. You had no right, Patricia said. Her voice was completely controlled. Quiet and precise, the way someone speaks when they believe they are correcting a child who should have known better. I was only saying, Claire began. You were being rude, Patricia said. She smoothed the front of her blouse with one hand. You have been rude all evening. To our guest, to this family. She is not family, Claire said. And that was the moment. She saw it cross Patricia's face. Not offense, not surprise. Something colder than both. Something that had been waiting behind Patricia's polished expression all evening, maybe for longer. She is more family to this table than you have ever managed to be, Patricia said. The words landed somewhere low and permanent. Claire looked at Garrett. He finally moved. He set the wine glass down on the sideboard with a careful click. He ran a hand through his brown hair. She had always found that gesture endearing. The way his fingers raked through when he was uncomfortable. She had loved that once. She did not love it now. Claire, he said, let's all just calm down. Your mother just struck me, she said. You were provoking her. His voice was measured, even rehearsed. You've been making comments all night. The room tilted slightly. She had been making comments. She had asked very politely why Amber was at this table again. She had been asking herself that question for 6 months. In the dark. At 3 in the morning. While Garrett slept beside her and she lay awake watching the ceiling and telling herself she was imagining things. She was not imagining things. She understood that now with absolute clarity. Standing in her mother-in-law's dining room, with her cheek burning and cranberry sauce soaking into a $5,000 rug, she understood that she had not been imagining one single thing. Her hands found her belly. 8 months, the baby kicked beneath her palm, firm and rolling and real. She pressed back gently. I know, she thought. I know, little one. I need to sit down, she said. Nobody moved to help her. She pulled out the nearest chair herself. She lowered herself into it slowly, one hand still on her belly. The chair scraped against the hardwood floor. Too loud in all that silence. Amber reached across the table and picked up her wine glass. She took a calm, easy sip. That small gesture broke something open in Claire's chest. Because Amber looked comfortable. That was the precise word. She reached for her glass with the ease of someone who had been sitting at this table for a long time. She did not look alarmed. She did not look like an outsider. She looked like she belonged there. And Claire, 8 months pregnant, cheeks still burning, sitting in a chair she had pulled out for herself, felt like the visitor. She pressed her palm harder against her face. 31 years old, 4 years of marriage, a baby growing inside her, a baby they had planned together, tried for together, cried happy tears over together. At midnight, 2 pink lines on a test. His arms around her, his voice saying, oh my God, Claire." She looked at Garrett again. He was looking at Amber, not checking on his wife, not watching Claire, looking at Amber with something that passed between them so quickly, Claire almost missed it. A look that lasted half a second, a look of reassurance, as if to say, "It's okay, I've got this." He was managing Amber's feelings, not Claire's. The dinner continued. That was the most surreal part of all. Patricia picked up her fork. Harold cleared his throat and made a comment about the turkey being dry this year. Aunt Renata started talking about her neighbor's fence dispute. Garrett sat back down and lifted his wine glass again. The dinner continued, as though nothing had happened. As though Claire's cheek wasn't still warm. As though the cranberry sauce wasn't still spreading across the white rug. As though any of this was normal. She sat at that table for exactly 4 more minutes. She counted them on the grandfather clock in the hallway, the old one that chimed every quarter hour with a low, mournful sound. 4 minutes, then she stood up. "Excuse me," she said. Her voice was steady. She was amazed by that. In the moment, she was genuinely astonished by her own steadiness. She folded her napkin and placed it beside her plate. She pushed her chair back. She walked to the front hall and took her coat from the hook. "Claire." Garrett's voice behind her. Low. Warning. She did not turn around. "Claire, don't be dramatic." She opened the front door. The November air hit her like something honest. Cold and clean and real. It smelled like wood smoke and wet leaves and the specific sharpness of a night that was about to freeze. She pulled her coat around her belly as best she could and walked carefully down Patricia's porch steps, one hand on the railing. She got in her car. She did not start the engine. She sat with both hands on the steering wheel and stared forward at nothing. The windows began to fog slowly from her breath. She watched Patricia's house through the fogging glass, light and movement behind the curtains. Life going on in there, dinner going on. Her phone buzzed on the passenger seat. A text from Garrett. "Come back inside, you're being ridiculous." She looked at that message for a long time. She read it 3 times, 4 times. Then she turned the phone face down on the seat. She pressed her forehead against the steering wheel. The wheel was cold and hard and solid against her skin. Real. She stayed like that, just breathing, feeling the cold and the solid and the real. The baby kicked twice, then was still. She lifted her head. The fogged window blurred the house lights into soft yellow shapes. She thought about what had just happened, not the slap itself. The slap was clear. What she was trying to understand was everything surrounding it. The way Amber sat at that table. The way Patricia had looked at Claire with that cold, knowing expression. The way Garrett had stood 3 feet away holding his wine. The way he had looked at Amber after. She started the car. She drove home very carefully. Both hands on the wheel, heater on low. The familiar streets empty at this hour. The gas station on 5th. The pharmacy where she picked up her prenatal vitamins every month. The turn onto their street. She pulled into their driveway. The house was dark. She had forgotten to leave the porch light on. She went inside. She didn't turn on any lights downstairs. She walked upstairs in the dark, one hand trailing along the wall, and she sat on the edge of the bed in her coat. The bedroom was cold. She sat there in her coat, in the dark, in the cold, and she finally allowed herself to think the thought she had been refusing to think for 6 months. He was having an affair, she knew. She had always known. God, I was so stupid, she thought. The signs were all there. The room felt very still around her. She pressed her palms flat against the mattress on either side of her and breathed, in through her nose, out through her mouth. The way the prenatal instructor had taught her, the baby shifted, low and heavy and present. Her phone buzzed again. She did not look at it. She sat in the dark bedroom and she breathed and she let herself understand that her life had just changed. Not because of the slap. The slap was just the moment she could no longer pretend she didn't already know. Her life had been changing for a long time. Tonight was just when she finally had to look at it. She did not sleep. She lay in the dark with both hands folded on her belly and stared at the ceiling and listened to the house breathe around her. The refrigerator humming downstairs, the heat cycling on and then off. A car passing on the street every few minutes, its headlights sweeping slow arcs across the ceiling above her. She thought about Amber. The first time she had seen her had been at a company party in May. 6 months ago. Garrett had invited Claire, which was unusual. He never usually brought her to work events. You'd hate it, he always said. Too boring. But he had invited her to this one, and she had come, And she had worn the blue dress that still fit her at 3 months pregnant, and she had stood at Garrett's side and shaken hands and smiled. Amber had appeared at the edge of their group, 20, young in the specific way of people who have always known they were attractive. Auburn hair that caught the light. A handshake that lasted half a second too long. This is Amber, Garrett had said. She's on my team. The way he said it. Too casual. A practice kind of casual that came from rehearsing. Claire had shaken her hand and smiled and thought, she's young. And then she had let herself think nothing else. She lay on her back now and thought about the phone calls. The way Garrett's phone had started ringing after 9 at night, several times a week. He would look at the screen and say it's work, sorry. And he would walk out to the garage or the backyard. She could see him through the kitchen window sometimes, walking in slow circles, talking quietly with his head down. She had told herself it was stress. He was stressed at work. She had her own pregnancy to manage. She didn't need to add his stress to her list. She had told herself a lot of things. She had also, in a small sideways way she barely admitted to herself, started checking his parking garage location, not on his phone. They had a building app, something they'd downloaded 2 years ago after a neighbor's car was broken into. She had found herself opening that app some evenings, checking which floor his car was on when he said he was working late. The car was never where it should have been. She had given herself explanations for that, too. She pressed her eyes shut. The clock read 3:47. She knew the time without looking because the heat had just cycled off. The house settled into a particular quiet at 3:47 that she had memorized during the first trimester, when the nausea woke her every night and she lay in exactly this position, counting sounds. The front door opened downstairs, Garrett's keys. His steps moving through the dark house, careful, not wanting to wake her. His feet on the stairs, the pause outside the bedroom door that lasted 3 seconds. Then he opened it. She kept her eyes closed. She heard him sit on the edge of the bed to remove his shoes. She felt the mattress shift under his weight. He lay down. He said nothing. He did not ask if she was okay. He did not say her name. He did not reach across to touch her shoulder the way he used to. He just lay there, 2 feet away, and was silent. She lay there and listened to him breathe and thought, I do not know this person. I am not sure I ever did. That thought was so large it swallowed everything else in the room. She must have finally slept because when she opened her eyes it was gray morning. Garrett's side of the bed was cold and empty. She could hear nothing from downstairs. She sat up slowly. Her back ached. It always ached now. She sat on the edge of the bed in the pale morning light and took inventory of herself. Cheek still tender. She pressed her fingers to it. No bruise visible. Patricia hadn't hit her hard enough to leave a mark you could photograph, just hard enough to deliver a message. Her phone had 17 notifications. 3 texts from Garrett, variations of, we need to talk, you're making this harder than it needs to be. I hope you've calmed down. 1 from Patricia, you disrupted a lovely family dinner. I expect an apology. 1 from Aunt Renata, Claire, honey, call me when you can. And 1 from a number she recognized because she had looked it up once, on a quiet Sunday afternoon when Garrett was supposedly at the gym, and immediately closed the screen and told herself she was being paranoid. Amber Cole. She stared at that notification. Amber had her phone number. She opened the message. Claire, I think it's time we talked. You deserve the truth. I'm sorry about last night. She read it 3 times. Not, there's nothing going on. Not, I think you misunderstood. Not, I'm just a colleague. You deserve the truth. Present tense. An acknowledgement, an apology for last night, specifically. She set the phone on the nightstand and sat very still. She got up and went to the bathroom. She stood at the mirror and looked at her own face. 31 years old, dark circles from months of bad sleep. Brown eyes that looked tired. Her hair loose from yesterday's braid. Her belly round and enormous beneath Garrett's old college shirt. She looked at herself for a long time. Then she did something she had not done in months. She called her brother. The phone rang twice. Hey, Maxwell's voice, thick with sleep. He was on the West Coast. It was barely 7 in the morning here, which made it not quite 4 there. Claire, you okay? No, she said. A pause. The sound of sheets, of someone sitting up fast. His voice changed completely in 1 second. Awake, alert, present. Tell me, he said. She sat down on the edge of the bathtub and she told him. She went through it carefully. Amber appearing 6 months ago. The late phone calls. The parking garage app. The dinners Patricia had been hosting with Amber as a guest. The text she had just received. And the slap. When she got to the slap, Maxwell went very quiet. Say that again, he said. She hit me, Max. Patricia Weston put her hand on you. Yes. The silence on his end lasted 6 full seconds. She counted them. You were 8 months pregnant, he said. Not a question, a statement. The way someone says a thing they are working to make real in their own mind. 8 months, she confirmed. Another pause. Okay, he said, and his voice was completely even in a way that told her he was working very hard to keep it that way. Here's what I need you to do right now. Take pictures of your cheek. Even if there's no visible mark, timestamp them, and write down everything that happened last night, every word, every moment, while you still remember it clearly. Max, I'm coming out there, he said. You don't have to do that, Claire. Very quiet, very calm. I'm coming out there. Something in her chest released, just slightly. Just the smallest loosening of something that had been coiled tight for a very long time. Okay, she said. Don't call Garrett back. Don't call Patricia back. Don't respond to anyone until we've talked again. A pause. And do not apologize to anyone for anything. Do you hear me? I hear you. Good. I'll call you back in an hour. She hung up and sat on the edge of the bathtub. The tiles were cold through her socks. The bathroom window let in pale, thin morning light. She looked at the shelf above the sink. She kept photographs there. Small framed ones she liked to look at while she brushed her teeth. Her and Garrett at their wedding. The two of them in Paris 2 years ago, laughing at something she couldn't quite remember now. Her mother's hands folding napkins at Christmas. She reached out and turned the wedding photo face down. Then she sat very still with her hands in her lap. She had known. That was what sat inside her chest like a stone right now. Not the slap. Not Amber's text. Not Garrett's silence in the bed beside her last night. The thing that hurt the most was the knowing that she had already known. Not consciously. She had protected herself from conscious knowing with every tool available. She had explained away each sign. She had looked past each clue. She had chosen again and again not to know. But somewhere underneath all that careful not knowing, some quiet and truthful part of her had always known. I'm not crazy, she thought. I know what I saw. She picked up her phone. She took the photographs of her cheek. She wrote down everything she could remember about the previous night. Every word Patricia had said. Every word Garrett had said. The exact position of everyone in the room. The look that had passed between Garrett and Amber. She texted the photographs to Maxwell with the time and date. Then she went downstairs and made herself toast. She stood at the kitchen counter and ate it slowly. The morning light came through the window in a long yellow rectangle across the counter. She looked at that rectangle of light. I'm not crazy. I know what I saw. I deserved better than this. Those two thoughts sat in her chest like stones, not comfortable, not comforting, but solid and real, and entirely unmistakably hers. Diane arrived at 9 without calling first. Just a knock and then her face through the door glass. She was holding 2 coffees and wearing the expression she kept for situations that required it. The expression that meant, I already know it's bad, just tell me how bad. Claire opened the door. Diane looked at her face. I heard, Diane. From who? Renata texted me. She came inside and set the coffees on the counter and turned to look at Claire properly. Not a quick glance, a full look. Sit down, Claire. I'm fine. Sit down anyway. Claire sat. Diane pulled the other stool close. She slid one of the coffees across. Decaf. She had remembered without being told. Tell me everything, Diane said. So Claire did. She told her the same story she had told Maxwell an hour earlier, but different in the telling. This was Diane who had met Garrett at the engagement party and smiled so carefully that night, who had said once, early in the relationship, he's very charming, isn't it? And left the observation right there without building anything onto it. When she finished, Diane was quiet for a moment. How long have you known? Claire asked. Diane looked at the counter. Diane, I suspected, Diane said. For about 4 months, I didn't know, but I suspected. And you didn't tell me. You were pregnant. You seemed happy. I didn't have proof. Only a feeling, and She stopped, I'm sorry. I should have said something. Claire wrapped both hands around the warm cup. Honey, Diane said quietly, I've been biting my tongue for years. Claire looked up. Years, she said. Diane's expression shifted. Something careful in it. Something about to be said for the first time. There were things before Amber, she said slowly. I don't know anything for certain, but there were things. The way he talked to women at parties. The way he disappeared at your own wedding for 20 minutes. Claire went very still. At our wedding, she said. 20 minutes, Diane said. You were talking to your Aunt Carol. You turned around and he was gone. He came back flushed and said he needed some air. Do you remember? She did remember. The small pulse of anxiety she had felt and immediately dismissed. He was just overwhelmed. It was a lot. He came back and they did their first dance and she let the pulse go without ever looking at it directly. What else? Claire asked. Diane hesitated. Then she said the Barcelona trip. 2 years ago. A business trip. 5 days. Claire had stayed home. Too tired. She had told him to go without her. He wasn't in Barcelona the whole time, Diane said. I saw a photo on social media. Vivian from the firm was in Marseille that same week. She posted pictures of a restaurant. There was a man in the background of one shot. She took out her phone. She had the photo saved. She turned it toward Claire. In the blurry background of a restaurant shot, recognizable despite the distance, was Garrett, and not Barcelona, beside a woman whose face was turned away from the camera. Claire stared at the photo. I'm not saying it proves anything, Diane said. You saved this, yes. For how long? 2 years. The kitchen was completely quiet. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside, a car started. I was going to tell you, Diane said. A few times I almost did. But you were happy, and then pregnant, and I kept thinking, if I'm wrong, I destroy everything for nothing. If I'm right, I destroy everything anyway, just sooner. Claire set the coffee down. She was not angry at Diane, she tested that. She expected to be angry, but she found she wasn't, because if she was truly honest with herself, she had given everyone permission to stay silent. She had made it very clear, in subtle and consistent ways, that she did not want to know. She had made not knowing look exactly like happiness. She had been performing happiness so well she had fooled everyone, including herself. What else? Claire said. Diane told her. The time she had called their apartment and Garrett answered and immediately handed the phone to Claire, even though Claire was busy. The 2 times she had seen Garrett's car parked in a neighborhood that made no sense. The baby shower 2 months ago, when Garrett stepped out to take a call and was gone for 17 minutes, Diane had counted. She had a list in her memory, a quiet, loyal record kept over years. Prayed to be wrong about, never set down in writing, but never forgotten either. I'm sorry, Diane said again. Stop apologizing, Claire said. Stood up. She needed to move. She walked to the window and stood with her back to Diane, looking out at the brown November backyard. Tell me about Amber. What do you know? She's been at every family dinner for 6 months. Patricia treats her like a daughter. Diane paused. There's one more thing. Claire turned. I looked her up, Diane said. Amber Cole. She's not just on Garrett's team. She's his direct report. He hired her. Claire absorbed that. He had hired her. He had placed her inside the infrastructure of his working life. He controlled her schedule, her performance reviews, her salary increases. He had built the relationship into the structure of his career. How long ago? Claire asked. 14 months ago. 14 months. She and Garrett had started trying to get pregnant 7 months after that. She did the math quietly and felt it land in her body like something dropped from a height. They had chosen to try for a baby while Amber was already in his life. She had believed they were beginning something new together. Both of them, deliberately, hopefully, together. She had tracked her cycle and taken prenatal vitamins and told him which days she was ovulating, and they had laughed about the absurdity of the timing, and she had believed all of it was completely real. He had already been sleeping with someone else. She put her hand on the window frame to steady herself. Claire, I'm okay. Her own voice surprised her. Flat and steady, I'm fine. She stood and let the truth rearrange everything. Every memory of the last 2 years was shifting. Every holiday, every dinner, every late night, every time she had accepted an explanation and felt relieved it was all tilting. Like a building reselling on new ground after an earthquake. The things that had seemed solid were hollow. The weight of that was enormous. And underneath it, something else, not grief, not yet. Something closer to recognition. She had not been crazy. She had not been paranoid, hormonal, difficult, oversensitive. She had been right. Every alarm that had sounded in the quiet of 3 in the morning, every instinct she had dismissed, every time she had doubted her own perception and apologized for it, she had been right. I'm not crazy. I know what I saw. She said it out loud this time. No, Diane said quietly. You never were. No, Claire agreed. I wasn't. She walked back to the counter and picked up her phone. There was a new text from Amber. I know this is a lot. I need you to know I didn't know about the baby when we started. He told me you two were basically separated. She read it 3 times. He had told Amber they were separated. While they had been sharing a bed. While they had been at prenatal appointments together. While they had been in the bathroom at midnight, 2 pink lines on a test, his arms around her. He had told another woman they were separated. She pressed her hands over her face. He never loved me, she thought. He loved the idea of me. The thought arrived fully formed, like something she had known for a long time and had finally been given permission to say. She lowered her hands. Okay, she said to Diane, I need you to help me find a lawyer. The best family law attorney in this city. Diane pulled out her phone without hesitation. Her name is Rachel Ford, she said. 15 years of practice. She doesn't lose. Claire stared at her best friend. How long have you had that name ready? She asked. Diane's expression was the closest thing to a confession that Diane ever allowed herself. 2 years, she said quietly, and somehow, impossibly, absurdly, Claire almost smiled. Garrett came home at noon. Claire was at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad. She had been writing for 2 hours, not her feelings. Facts, dates, specific conversations, things she had noticed and dismissed. Things she remembered now that she was allowing herself to remember them. She heard his key in the lock. She did not look up. He came into the kitchen. She heard him stop when he saw her. Claire, his voice had that particular quality. Controlled. Measured, prepared. He had driven home with a plan for how this conversation would go. Sit down, she said. She kept writing. A pause. I'm sorry about last night, he said. My mother was out of line. She finished the sentence she was writing. She set down the pen. She looked up at him. Garrett Weston, 33 years old. She had loved this face. She had known it in every kind of light. The small scar above his left eyebrow from a bike accident when he was 11. The way his jaw tightened when he was uncomfortable. His jaw was tight right now. Your mother was out of line, she repeated. Is that all? What do you want me to say? Tell me about Amber, she said. There it was, the jaw, the hand going through the hair. He turned slightly toward the window, then back. He managed the impulse to walk away. There's nothing to tell, he said. That's not true. Claire, 14 months, she said. She's been on your team for 14 months. You hired her. She watched his face. I know, Garrett. Pause. I don't know what you think you know. You told her we were separated, she said, quietly, evenly. Did you tell yourself that too? Was that how you made it work in your head? It's not. He stopped, started again. Our marriage has been struggling for a long time. She let that land. She breathed through it. Our marriage, she said. Yes. You know that it has. You've been distant since I've been pregnant, she said. I've been growing your child. That's not the only issue. She looked at him. He was doing it. Right now in their kitchen, he was doing the exact thing she had read about and always believed happened to other women. He was rearranging the reality of what had occurred. He was making the story about her distance, her failures, her contribution to the problem. He was finding a way to make her responsible. And the frightening part, the truly frightening part, was that 6 months ago she might have sat here and let him. She might have nodded and thought, maybe he's right. Maybe I haven't been enough. She was not going to do that today. We had a normal marriage, she said. We were trying to conceive a child together. You were having an affair during the months we were actively trying. That is what happened. That is the only story. You're oversimplifying a complicated. Stop, she said it clearly. Not loudly. Don't gaslight me. He blinked. I'm not. You are, she said. You have been doing it for a long time. And I am done accepting it. He was quiet. She opened the folder on the table in front of her and slid a document across to him. A printout of their joint bank account statements. 6 months. 47 transactions highlighted in yellow. She had spent the morning going through them line by line. Hotel bookings she had never been on. Restaurant charges for 2 at places she'd never heard of. A weekend reservation at a bed and breakfast 3 hours north. During a weekend, he told her he had a conference. Flowers. He had sent someone flowers $43 at a time, and she had never received a single one. 47 transactions. $11,200. Your money, she said. Our money. Spent on your affair. He looked at the papers. She watched him calculate. Some of those are legitimate work expenses, he said. Really? She picked up her pen. Show me which ones. He did not answer. I have time, she said, Claire. His voice shifted. Softer now. The next register in his toolkit. Regret. I know I've hurt you. I am genuinely sorry. But I need you to understand that what happened between us was not. What I understand, she said, is that you had a relationship with a woman you employed, which is a policy violation at your company. You spent marital funds on that relationship. You allowed your mother to strike your pregnant wife and then suggested I had provoked it. She held his gaze. I'm meeting with a lawyer tomorrow morning. The soft register disappeared. You're not serious. I am completely serious. Claire, you're being emotional. I'm being clear, she said. She was. She was astonished by how clear she was. Something that had been coiled in her for 6 months had simply released. You should also speak to a lawyer. Today, if possible. You're not thinking about the baby. Something moved through her fast and hot. Don't said, quiet, precise. Do not ever suggest I'm not thinking about this child. I'm just saying this baby is exactly why I know what I'm doing, she said. I know what kind of home I need to build for her. I know what I will not accept for myself or for her. Her, she had said her. She hadn't meant to. They didn't know the sex. She just had a feeling, a deep and unshakable feeling, and the word had come out before she could stop it. Garrett registered it. Something moved across his face. Something that looked briefly and uncomfortably like real grief. Good, she thought. Feel something true for once. We can fix this, he said. You don't want to fix this, she said. You want this to disappear quietly. You want me to absorb it and adjust and keep the household running and not disrupt your life. She held his eyes. I can't want that for you anymore. He stared at her. She stared back. For the first time in 4 years, she was looking at him and not hoping he would say the right thing, not angling herself toward his approval, not managing his feelings while quietly abandoning her own. She was just looking at him and seeing him with complete clarity. I need you to stay somewhere else tonight, she said. This is my house. It is our house, and I am asking you, while I am 8 months pregnant, to give me tonight. She did not look away. You owe me that. A long silence. He reached across the table and took the bank statements. He folded them without looking at them and put them in his jacket pocket. I'll go to my parents, he said. Of course he would. He took his keys from the counter. He walked to the front door. He stopped with his hand on the frame and his back to her. I do love you, he said. In my way, in my way. She thought about what those 3 words contained, the convenient smallness of them, Love reduced to fit his capacity for it. Love as a thing he defined on his own terms, in his own image. I know, she said. The door closed. She sat at the kitchen table. She could feel her heart beating. She pressed her hand to her chest and felt it. Steady, fast but steady. Still going, she thought, he never loved me the way I deserved to be loved. And somehow, finally, she was going to stop being surprised by that. She picked up her pen. She went back to the legal pad. She kept writing. That night, she reorganized the kitchen drawers. She hadn't planned to. It started because she was looking for a rubber band, and the junk drawer was a disaster, and she thought she'd just sort it out a little. 2 hours later, she was standing at the counter at 11 at night, with every spice from the cabinet, arranged alphabetically by the first letter of its name. The kitchen smelled like cumin and coriander, and the faint sweetness of the cinnamon she'd spilled slightly while moving it. She put the turmeric next to the tarragon. Starting over feels impossible, she thought. But staying feels worse, and that she understood was how you knew. Maxwell landed at 4:30 in the afternoon. He texted from the airport, landed. Renting a car. Don't cook, I'm bringing food. He arrived at 6 with Thai food in 4 plastic bags, a rolling suitcase, and the expression she had known since childhood. The quiet, focused expression that meant he was already taking inventory, already running calculations she couldn't see. He was 38 years old with sharp features that had gotten more interesting with time. Lines around his eyes from years of squinting at computer screens and contracts and negotiations. He had built his first company at 25, sold it at 30. The second one was considerably larger and still his. He set the food bags on her counter, then he turned and looked at her. Not a glance, a full assessment. You look tired, he said. I am tired. He crossed the kitchen and pulled her into a careful hug, one arm around her shoulders, mindful of the belly, his hand on the back of her head. She felt the solid warmth of him. She did not cry. She had decided that morning she was not going to cry. Not because crying was weakness, she knew it wasn't, but because if she started, she wasn't sure she would stop, and she needed to stay clear right now. She needed to be able to think. I'm okay, she said into his shoulder. I know you are, he said. I also know you're furious. She pulled back and looked at him. Careful observation, she said. 26 years of watching you. He went to the cabinet and found her bowls without asking. He knew her kitchen. He had helped her carry boxes when she moved in. Tell me everything. They sat at the table and she told him. She had told this story 4 times now. To herself in the dark, to Maxwell on the phone, to Diane over coffee, to the yellow legal pad. Each telling had refined it slightly. The version she told him now was precise and ordered and almost entirely without emotion. It was exactly the kind of telling, she realized, that would hold up in a lawyer's office. He listened without speaking. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. The bank account, he said. $11,000. Over 6 months. Is there a joint investment account? She hadn't checked. She said so. He nodded. Check tonight. All accounts where both your names appear. Look for transfers, changes to beneficiaries, anything that looks like movement. He met her eyes. Men who feel cornered tend to move quickly. Garrett isn't. She stopped. Maxwell raised one eyebrow. Finish that sentence, he said. She thought about Garrett at the kitchen table that afternoon. The way he had taken the bank statements and folded them and put them in his pocket without looking at them. The way he had stood in her kitchen and told her she was oversimplifying. He's capable of it, she said. Yes, Maxwell said. He is. After dinner, she checked the accounts. Maxwell sat beside her at the kitchen table, watching the screen over her shoulder. They went through each one methodically, checking, the way you check a house after a storm, for things that should be there and aren't. The joint investment account had a $12,000 withdrawal 2 days ago. 2 days ago, the day before the dinner at Patricia's house. The day before the slap. She sat very still. He knew, she said. He was preparing, Maxwell said. His voice was entirely level. He knew something was going to happen at that dinner, she thought through it, or he was expecting a confrontation. He pulled $12,000 the day before. He's been planning, Maxwell said. Probably for longer than you think. She felt cold. This was the version she hadn't let herself consider. Not just an affair. Not just weakness and selfishness and poor choices. Something more deliberate. Garrett was a finance manager. He understood assets. He understood accounts. He had been quietly moving pieces on a board she hadn't known she was sitting at. I need that lawyer appointment to happen as soon as possible, she said. Tomorrow morning, Maxwell said. 8 o'clock, I already confirmed it. She looked at him. You called Rachel Ford's office? Before I got on the plane. He said it without apology. I moved the appointment up. She made space. How much did you tell her? Enough, he said. She was about to say something about doing this herself, about not needing him to run things on her behalf. But she looked at his face and she saw what was under the controlled expression. He was furious. He had been furious since 7 in the morning when she called and told him his pregnant sister had been struck in her mother-in-law's dining room. He had been furious on the plane. He was furious right now, sitting at her kitchen table drinking water and making calm observations about investment accounts. He was doing an extraordinary job of not showing it, but she knew him. She reached across the table and put her hand on his arm. "Max," she said. He looked at her. "Thank you," she said. Something in his face shifted. The careful control softened just slightly, the way it only ever did for her. "You don't have to thank me," he said. "I know." She squeezed his arm once. "I'm thanking you anyway." He put his hand over hers for a moment. Then he straightened. "Okay," he said. "Tonight we copy every financial document you can access. I'll photograph them as backup. Tomorrow we go to Rachel Ford." After that he paused. "What?" "I'm going to speak with Garrett," he said. "And with Patricia." She looked at him carefully. "Separately?" she said. "Yes." She thought about Patricia's face the night before. The cold satisfaction in her expression after the slap. The way she had picked up her fork and gone back to dinner. She was not a woman who expected consequences. "Patricia doesn't respond well to pressure," Claire said. "No," Maxwell agreed, "she isn't." A pause. "She's also not someone who has ever had a conversation with someone like me." He said it plainly, not arrogantly. As a simple statement of fact, Maxwell Hartwell had been on the cover of 2 business publications this year. He understood leverage in ways that had nothing to do with anger. He knew how to enter a room. He knew how to be heard. Patricia Weston had never met anyone like him. "I don't want threats," Claire said. "No threats," he said. "A calm, honest conversation, Max." "I will be genuinely calm," he said. "I will also be very clear." That night she could not sleep again. She lay in the center of the bed, not her side, not his side, the center, and stared at the ceiling and felt the baby move in slow, rolling loops. She thought about the life she had been building in her imagination since the positive test. The nursery, the crib, still in its box in the corner because Garrett kept saying he'd assemble it and never had. The pediatrician she had already researched. The 6 months of maternity leave she had mapped out carefully. All of that was still possible. The realization arrived quietly and sat with her in the dark. She was still going to have this baby. She was still going to be a mother. The nursery could still be yellow. She would assemble the crib herself if she had to. The pediatrician was still a good pediatrician. Garrett's absence changed the shape of everything. It did not remove her from the story. She was still herself, still the person who had wanted and planned and already loved this child in a way she couldn't describe to anyone who hadn't felt it. He could not take that from her. No one could. Maxwell slept in the guest room. She could hear him through the wall, steady breathing. He had always been able to sleep anywhere, in any circumstance. She had envied this since they were children. She lay in the center of the bed. The sheets smelled like clean cotton. She had stripped the bed that afternoon and put on fresh ones. She had needed that. She had needed the smell of laundry and nothing else. It was past midnight. The baby was moving, not kicking, rolling. The slow, deep movement the pregnancy books called practice breathing. She lay with both hands on her belly and felt it. She'd been lying here for 3 hours. The stages came one at a time, numbness first, a kind of floating above herself, then the details surfacing without invitation. The Barcelona receipt she had found in his coat pocket 2 years ago. He had said it was a client dinner. She had believed him. The long auburn hair on his jacket collar smoothed away without a thought. The time she had checked his parking location, and the car was never where it should have been. She had smoothed all of it away. Then the larger thing. The thing she kept returning to, the way a tongue returns to a sore tooth, the trying. 8 months of tracking and timing and hope and disappointment, and then finally the month they least expected, it had worked. She had stood in this bathroom with the test in her hand and called him in. They had looked at those 2 lines together. He had cried. She had believed those tears were real. Maybe they were. She turned that thought over carefully. Maybe he had been capable of holding 2 realities at the same time, genuinely wanting this child, maintaining a relationship with Amber, lying to both of them simultaneously. Maybe that was the most honest thing about him, not that he felt nothing, but that he felt things in compartments that never touched each other. The complexity of that was more disturbing than simple calculation. She turned onto her side, the only comfortable position now, her belly heavy against the mattress. The closet door was open slightly. She could see Garrett's shirts in the darkness. She would need to box them. Tomorrow or the day after. She could not keep looking at them. She thought about the first time she had seen him. A mutual friend's party 5 years ago. He had been standing by the window with a drink, laughing at something. She had thought, there's someone who knows how to be easy in the world. She had been serious her whole life. A little too responsible, a little too careful. He had seemed like someone things didn't cost very much. She had mistaken ease for depth. She could see that clearly now. He wasn't easy because he was content. He was easy because things didn't require much of him. He held people lightly because he never fully placed his weight. Not with her. Not, she suspected, with Amber either. He moved through lives taking what he needed and releasing his grip when it stopped being convenient. She pressed her face into the pillow. She allowed herself, here alone in the dark, to feel the full weight of it, the loneliness of the last 2 years. The loneliness she had classified as normal. What long marriages felt like. The loneliness of lying beside someone and feeling an ocean between them. She had thought it was her. She had thought she had become too tired, too pregnant, too ordinary. Somewhere along the way I became invisible to him. Not to the world, not to people who knew her, to him. And in trying to make herself visible again, she had twisted herself into smaller and smaller shapes, apologized for taking up space, told herself she was being too sensitive, dismissed the quiet voice that had always been telling her the truth. She had not been doing anything wrong. She just hadn't been new anymore. She lay with that thought for a long time. The clock read 2:11. Then 3:04. The baby kicked, sharp and clear, as if to say, "I'm here." She pressed back. "I know," she whispered. "I know you're here." She thought about the nursery. The pale yellow walls she had chosen in August, standing in a store that smelled like wood and baby powder, imagining who this baby would be. A child had run past her in that store and laughed, and she had felt, that afternoon, like someone opening a door. That door was still open. She held on to that. She must have slept because suddenly it was gray morning light, and her alarm was going off at 7. She reached over and silenced it. Her face was wet. She had been crying in her sleep. She lay still for a moment, understanding that. Then she reached up and wiped her face. She got up, she showered, she put on real clothes, the maternity jeans and the soft blue sweater that made her feel like a person. She braided her hair because she needed to do something with her hands. She went downstairs. Maxwell was already at the kitchen table. Coffee made, laptop open. A legal pad of his own with notes on it. He looked up when she came in. "How much did you sleep?" he asked. "Some. Good enough." He closed the laptop. "How are you?" She poured coffee. She thought about the night, the 3:04 darkness. The crying she'd done in her sleep, because she hadn't been able to do it awake. "I feel like someone showed me that the house I thought I lived in was a stage set," she said. "Like none of the walls were real. Just props." She sat down across from him, and I keep walking through the rooms touching the walls, trying to figure out which ones are solid. He looked at her steadily. "The solid ones," he said, "are the ones you built." She looked at him. "Your career," he said, "your friendships. The way you've handled the last 48 hours, that's all you. That's solid." He held her gaze. The stage set was his. "You were just living in someone else's story." She sat with that. "I've been living in someone else's story," she said slowly. "Yes, for 4 years. Yes." She looked at the steam rising from her mug. "I'm going to need to figure out what my own story looks like," she said. "Yes," he said. "You are." A pause. "But not this morning." She almost laughed. "Not quite, but almost." "No," she said. "This morning I just need to get to Rachel Ford's office." "Rachel Ford's office," he agreed. He turned his legal pad toward her. "Here's what we're bringing." They spent 40 minutes going through it together. By the time they walked out the front door, she felt something she hadn't expected. Not ready, not okay, but clear. Like a window that had been fogged for a long time, finally, carefully wiped clean. Rachel Ford was 50 years old with silver-streaked hair and the kind of stillness that came from 15 years of sitting with people at their most fractured. She listened to everything without interrupting. She asked precise questions. She looked at the financial documents. She examined the time-stamped photographs of Claire's cheek. She went through the bank statements with the highlighted transactions. She read Amber's text message without expression. When Claire finished, Rachel Ford folded her hands on the desk. "You have strong grounds," she said, simply, without drama. "The financial movements alone give us significant leverage. The documented withdrawals before any confrontation suggest premeditation, which matters considerably in asset division." She looked at Claire directly. "The assault, his mother," Claire said. "The assault by his mother," Rachel said, "in his presence, in your 3rd trimester, with no protective response from him, that speaks to a documented pattern of disregard for your safety and well-being. It will matter." Maxwell was sitting beside Claire. He had been almost completely silent during the entire meeting. He had let her speak. He had let her present. He had understood without being told that this needed to be her. Now he leaned forward slightly. "What's the fastest path to getting Claire into a secure position?" he asked. "Financially and legally, before the baby arrives." Rachel Ford looked at him evenly. The look of someone who had seen many powerful men in this office and was not impressed or intimidated by any of them. "I understand the instinct to accelerate," she said, "but the fastest path and the best path are not the same path, particularly when there is a child involved." She returned her attention to Claire. "We want to be thorough. We want every account traced. If money was moved, we want to know where it went. That requires a week, not a day." "A week is fine," Claire said. "I just need to know the baby is protected." "The baby is protected," Rachel said. "Legally, from the moment of birth, her rights exist independently of anything her father does or doesn't do. His behavior affects custody terms. It does not reduce her rights." A brief pause. "And your settlement position is strong." They talked for another hour. By the time they walked out of the building, Claire had a retainer agreement in her bag and a plan beginning to take shape. It was 11 in the morning. The November air was sharp and cold. The sky was the particular gray of late autumn. Maxwell walked her to the car. "I'm going to Patricia's house now," he said. She stopped. "Max, calm conversation," he said. "I told you. What exactly are you going to say?" He looked at her over the roof of the car. Quiet, level. "I'm going to explain what happens next," he said, "and give her the opportunity to understand it clearly." He drove to Patricia's house alone. Claire drove to Diane's apartment. Diane had tea ready. Claire sat on the couch with her feet on the coffee table and the baby moving in slow circles and tried to imagine what was happening on the other side of the city. Maxwell called at 12:40. "Okay," he said. "What happened?" "I had a conversation with Patricia and Harold, and I told them what happened on Sunday evening was an assault, that I would be consulting with a lawyer about whether to pursue further action, that if they chose to continue supporting Garrett's behavior and opposing Claire's interests, they should expect the events of Sunday night to become part of an official record." A pause. "I also mentioned that I know 3 members of Harold's company board personally." She pressed her eyes shut. "Max." I was perfectly calm, he said. "I also told them that my sister's primary concern is not retaliation. It is the well-being of her daughter, and that if they chose to cooperate with the settlement process, respectfully and in good faith, I would consider the matter of Sunday evening handled." "You gave them an out," she said. "Yes." "Why?" "Because your daughter is going to need grandparents," he said, "and giving people the chance to do better is more useful than destroying them." A pause. Patricia cried. "Silence!" "Patricia," she said. "Yes." Patricia Weston cried. "She did." Another pause. I don't think she had ever had anyone tell her plainly, directly, to her face, exactly what she had done. She has lived a long time surrounded by people who defer to her. The experience of being seen clearly. He seemed to search for the right word. It shocked her. Claire sat with that. "What about Garrett?" she said. "Not there. But I've arranged a meeting tomorrow afternoon, his lawyer, Rachel Ford, both of us. A starting point, a mediation. A starting point," he said again. "We see what he's willing to do." A pause. "I also had a conversation with Amber Cole." She sat up slightly. "When?" "This morning before the appointment. She reached out through a professional network. She found me through your profile." He paused. "She wants to meet with you. Directly. She says she has documentation, texts and emails. Things Garrett told her. She wants to give them to you." Claire was quiet. She thought about Amber's messages. "You deserve the truth." The apology that contained an accusation. Amber sitting at Patricia's table with the ease of someone who had been given a false map and followed it faithfully. 2 women, deceived from different angles by the same man. "Tell her I'll think about it," Claire said. The mediation happened the next afternoon. She prepared for 24 hours. Not what to say. Rachel had given clear instructions about that, which was primarily to say as little as possible. She prepared emotionally. She sat with the image of Garrett across a conference table, and she thought about what she would feel and what she would do with those feelings. What she had not anticipated was how diminished he would look. He came in with a lawyer named Bruce she had never met. He was wearing a dark suit, and he looked like he had not slept in 2 days. The particular sharpness she had always associated with him was entirely gone. He looked depleted, smaller than she remembered. He did not look at her when he sat down. He looked at the table. The lawyer spoke. Numbers, accounts, a timeline of the marriage, the pregnancy, the assets. Rachel Ford had done exceptional work. She laid everything on the table with a quiet precision that made Claire deeply grateful she had made that call. At some point, Garrett looked up and across the table. He met her eyes. He looked like he wanted to say something. She could see him working toward it. She looked back at him steadily. She did not help him. She did not soften her expression. She did not fill the silence the way she always used to fill his silences. She just looked at him, clear and calm and present and done. He was the first to look away. That told her something she couldn't quite name. Not victory, not triumph, information. After the meeting, she stood on the pavement outside the building and breathed the cold November air. The sky was gray paper above her, her breath fogged in front of her face. Maxwell came out behind her and put his hand on her shoulder. She did not speak. She just stood there and breathed and felt not happy, not relieved, clear, like a window she had needed to clean for a very long time. The crib was still in its box in the corner of the nursery. She had been walking past it for 2 months. On a Thursday afternoon, 36 weeks along, Claire Hartwell opened the box. She spread the instruction sheet across the pale yellow floor. She sorted the hardware into small groups by size. She arranged them in order of use. She found the Allen wrench in its small paper packet, and she began. It took 2 hours and 20 minutes. The bracket on the left side refused to cooperate for nearly 15 minutes. She muttered at it. She tried 3 different positions. She set it down, went to get a glass of water, came back, and tried again. It cooperated. When she was done, she sat on the floor with her back against the wall and looked at what she had built. Cream-colored. Simple slats, solid. She pushed herself to standing and tested each joint with both hands. She shook it gently. She pressed her weight against it. It did not move. She had made it solid. She had been doing small things like this for the past week. Not large things. Not dramatic things. Small things that needed doing and that she had been waiting on someone else to do for her. She had called her mother. Eleanor Hartwell had listened without speaking for 15 minutes. Then she had said, "I'll be on a plane Friday." That was all. No advice. No warnings. No predictions. Just, "I'm coming." It had been exactly the right thing to say. She had called her supervisor at work, a woman named Linda who had 2 children and had navigated her own difficult years with a kind of quiet grace. She told Linda plainly that her personal circumstances had changed and that she planned to return from maternity leave as scheduled. Linda had said, "Absolutely, you're one of the best people I have. Whatever you need." She had not cried during that call. She had cried briefly afterward in the car, then wiped her face and driven home. She had met Amber Cole. She had not told Maxwell in advance. She told Diane, who came as backup and sat in the coffee shop booth across from Amber with careful, protective eyes. Amber was 27 and less formidable than she had been in Claire's imagination. Not cartoonish, not a villain. A young woman who had believed a story a man had told her, faithfully and completely for 14 months. She had her hands around a mug. She was not looking at Claire directly. "He told me you two hadn't been intimate in over a year," Amber said. "He told me the pregnancy was unexpected and complicated, but it didn't change what he felt." "We got pregnant on purpose," Claire said. "We were trying." Amber closed her eyes. "I know that now," she said. "What made you decide to tell me?" Claire asked. Amber was quiet for a moment. "The dinner," she said finally. "When Patricia hit you. When I saw that and saw Garrett just stand there," she stopped, gathered herself. "I understood in that moment that I had been used. Whatever story he told me about you was a way of keeping me available and compliant." She looked up. Her eyes were direct. "He didn't love me. He used us both." The coffee shop was warm around them. A machine hissed. Someone laughed at the counter. Outside, people walked past in coats. "What do you want from this?" Claire asked. "Nothing," Amber said. "I'm leaving the company. I've given notice. I have documentation of how he behaved toward me professionally. I thought you should have copies." She slid a folder across the table. "I'm sorry. I know that doesn't cover what happened, but I am." Claire looked at the folder. "It doesn't cover it," she said, "but I believe you." She drove home from that meeting and sat in her parked car in the driveway for 6 minutes. She sat with the folder on the passenger seat. She thought about what Amber had said. He didn't love me either. She thought about how much sadder that made everything. Not simpler. The same complicated grief and the same necessary forward motion. But sadder. Because he had moved through 2 women's lives and given back as little as he could manage and called it love and told himself it was enough. She had spent 4 years believing the problem was her. It had never been her. That understanding, not for the first time, but arriving with more weight each time, settled into her chest like something warm. She picked up the folder. She went inside. Over the following days, she did things slowly and with intention that she had always done quickly and automatically. She made soup. Real soup from her mother's recipe. The chicken soup Eleanor had made every winter of Claire's childhood. Egg noodles and dill and the particular golden color of long-cooked broth. She stood in the kitchen and chopped vegetables and felt the rhythm of it. The knife on the board, the smell of onion releasing, the sound of the pot beginning to simmer. She ate it in 3 meals over 2 days and felt, each time, something close to comfort. She painted the hallway. Just one wall that had needed it for 2 years. She drove to the hardware store and chose a warm cream color, nearly the same as the nursery. She came home and painted. She was not a skilled painter. She got it on her hands and on her shirt and on the baseboards, and she did not care even slightly. When she was done, the wall was the color she had chosen. That was something. She organized her finances. She sat at the kitchen table with Rachel Ford's notes and her own bank statements and her pay stubs, and she built a clear picture of what her life looked like now, alone, and what it would look like after the settlement. It was not as frightening as she had imagined. She had her own income, her own accounts, her own career. She had Maxwell, who had made clear without saying it directly that whatever she needed was available. She had her mother, who was arriving Friday. She was not starting from nothing. She was starting from herself. On Friday afternoon, Eleanor Hartwell came through the front door, 62 years old, silver hair, warm eyes. She set down her bag and opened her arms, and Claire, standing in the hallway in front of the freshly painted wall, fell apart. Not the quiet nighttime crying, actual crying, with her face in her mother's shoulder and sounds she didn't recognize as her own voice. Crying that had been waiting behind 4 years of management and adjustment and not knowing. Her mother held on. She did not say it will be okay. She did not say you're better off without him. She said nothing. She just held her daughter and stayed. After a while, Claire lifted her head. "Hi, Mom," she said. "Hi, sweetheart," Eleanor said. She wiped Claire's face with her thumb, the way she had done when Claire was 5 and 8 and 12. Practical and gentle and completely unsentimental. "Come," she said. "Let's make some tea." They went to the kitchen. They sat at the table with warm mugs, and the late afternoon light going golden through the window, and the baby turning slow loops inside her, and Claire felt, for the first time since the night of the slap, that she was in the right place. Not a stage set. Her place. December arrived while she wasn't paying attention. She woke one morning to find the tree outside her kitchen window completely bare overnight. Every last leaf gone, just branches against a white sky. She stood at the window in her robe with her coffee and looked at them for a long time. There was something honest about bare branches. Nothing pretending to be what it wasn't. Rachel Ford called on a Wednesday morning. "He's accepted the terms," she said. Claire pressed her free hand flat against the cold glass of the window. "All of them?" she said. "The primary residence stays with you through your daughter's 18th birthday. The investment account is divided 60-40 in your favor, given the documented premeditated withdrawal. Child support is calculated at 18% of his verified income, reviewed annually with documentation. He receives standard visitation with specific provisions and clear parameters." Rachel paused. He also agreed to provide a written statement to his company acknowledging that his relationship with a direct report violated company policy. "That last item wasn't in the original terms," Claire said. "It came in yesterday morning," Rachel said. His lawyer called at 8. "I believe the motivation came from Mr. Hartwell's ongoing conversations with Harold Weston. Whatever was said there had a significant effect." She didn't ask what Maxwell had said to Harold. She didn't need to. "What about the assault?" she said. "Patricia." Rachel was quiet for a moment. "Patricia Weston contacted my office 2 days ago," she said. "She asked if she could submit a statement." Claire turned away from the window. "A statement," she said. "She wanted it on record," Rachel said carefully. Her exact words were that what happened on Sunday evening was unacceptable and wrong. She expressed regret for her actions. A pause. "I've attached it to the file. It is not a legal document, but it exists. If you ever need it, it's there." Claire sat down at the kitchen table. She thought about Patricia Weston, the French candles, the Italian rug, the particular expression on her face after the slap, the cold, satisfied look of a woman who expected no consequences. And then Maxwell's voice on the phone. She'd never had anyone see her clearly before. It shocked her. What did it take, she wondered, to move through the world long enough that the first honest accounting of your actions made you cry? What did it take to be seen? "I don't need to respond to it," Claire asked. "You don't need to do anything with it," Rachel said. "It exists. That's sufficient." She thanked Rachel and hung up. She sat at the kitchen table. Her mother was in the guest room. Maxwell had flown back to California 2 days earlier, board meeting he couldn't move. He had extracted a daily phone call promise from her. She kept it. She sat at the kitchen table and thought about what justice felt like. She had imagined it would feel like winning, like something conquered. It felt quieter than that. It felt like the removal of weight she hadn't known how long she'd been carrying. The slow release of something that had been pressing on her chest for years, without her noticing how much it cost her to breathe around it. She thought about Garrett at the mediation table, not meeting her eyes. His lawyer and the documents and the careful formal language of dismantling a shared life. The way everything had been laid out in plain language with no softening and no performance. She thought about herself at that table, calm, clear, present. She had not apologized once. She had not minimized anything once. She had not managed his feelings once. That was the victory that mattered most. Not the house or the 60-40 split or even Patricia's statement filed in a folder at Rachel Ford's office. It was the fact that she had sat in that room and been entirely, uncomplicatedly herself. She had stopped performing. She got up and put the kettle on. She stood at the counter and waited for the water to boil and thought about all the people who had helped her find solid ground. Maxwell, with his quiet, controlled fury and his talent for making powerful people feel the weight of what they had done without ever raising his voice. Diane, with 2 years of bitten tongue and a lawyer's name already researched. Rachel Ford, who handled everything with professional precision and genuine care. Amber, of all people, with her folder and her apology. Even Patricia, in the end. Even Harold. The kettle clicked. She poured the tea. Her mother appeared in the kitchen doorway in her robe, silver hair loose, looking entirely at home everywhere she went, the way Eleanor always had. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Heavy," Claire said. "And okay, those can coexist," Eleanor said. "They can," Claire agreed. She looked at her mother. She thought about what it had taken Eleanor to do what she had done. After her father died at 58, Eleanor had done the impossible thing. She had kept going, not in a grim, enduring way, in a genuinely alive way. She had moved to a smaller house and grown an extraordinary garden and read more books than anyone Claire knew and made friends she'd never had room for before. At 62, she was one of the most alive people Claire had ever met. "I've been thinking," Claire said. Eleanor wrapped both hands around her mug. "About what he took," Claire said. "The future I had in my head. The specific version of the family I imagined. He took that particular future." "Yes," her mother said carefully, "and I'm going to grieve that." She looked at her mug. "I'm going to give myself permission to grieve it properly." "Good," Eleanor said, but she paused. "The future I actually want is still there. It looks different, but it's there." She looked up. "There's a graduate program I've been looking at for years. Executive communication strategy. I kept putting it off because the timing was never right." She almost smiled. The timing was never going to be right. Eleanor was already smiling. "Apply," she said simply. "I am," Claire said. "I already downloaded the application." They sat at the table and drank their tea. The white sky outside had softened to something almost lavender. Later that morning, Diane called. "I have a question," Diane said. "And you can absolutely say no." "What?" "There's a woman in my book club. She's going through something similar. Long marriage, late discovery. She's been very isolated, and she mentioned she wished she could talk to someone who had actually been through it." A pause. "I didn't say anything to her about you, but I thought, would you ever?" "Yes," Claire said. Diane paused. "Just like that?" "Yes," Claire said again. "Not right now, after the baby comes and I found my footing. But yes." She thought about 3:47 in the morning. The specific loneliness of knowing something was wrong and not being allowed to know it. "If talking about it helps someone," she said, "then I'll talk." "Okay," Diane said softly. "Okay." After she hung up, Claire sat quietly for a long moment. She thought about what it meant to turn the worst thing that had happened to her into something useful for someone else. She was not there yet. The wound was still recent. She was still inside the process of it. But she could see the shape of the other side. There was another side. That was not nothing. The hardest part, she thought, hadn't been the betrayal itself. The hardest part had been admitting, "I knew all along." And she had admitted it. And she was still here, and her daughter was still coming. And that all of that together was everything. The baby came on a Tuesday. Of course she did. Claire had always been a Tuesday person. Born on a Tuesday. Got the job that started her career on a Tuesday phone call. She had thought of this sometimes as superstition and sometimes as pattern. And today she thought of it as the universe being consistent. Labor lasted 18 hours. Eleanor was there for every minute of it. She sat in the corner of the room in a hospital chair with her reading glasses on top of her head and her hands folded in her lap, and she was simply steadily present. She did not offer advice. She did not tell Claire what to do or what to expect. She was just there the way she had learned to be there in the years since losing her husband, the way grief had taught her that presence was the only gift that reliably mattered. Maxwell arrived at the 12-hour mark. He had been in a board meeting in San Francisco when Claire's text came through. He had looked at his phone under the table, stood up, said, "I have to go," and left without elaborating. He sat in the waiting room with his laptop and his coffee and his expression of contained worry and texted Diane regular updates in a group thread that also included Claire's mother and Aunt Renata and 3 other people who loved Claire and were waiting in their own ways across various time zones. At 4:17 in the morning on a December Tuesday, Claire Hartwell gave birth to a daughter, 6 pounds and 14 ounces. Dark, unfocused eyes, the particular smell of someone who had never been in the world before. The nurse placed her on Claire's chest and she was warm and impossibly small, and Claire could feel her breathing. The tiny, fast movement of new lungs doing the thing they were built for. She pressed her hand against that small back and felt it. She did not speak for a long time. She just held her. Eleanor was standing at the edge of the room, her hand pressed over her mouth, her eyes bright. Maxwell had been let in. He was standing against the far wall with his arms crossed and his expression doing something she had never seen it do before. Something between ferocity and tenderness and the specific vertigo of meeting someone entirely new. He was trying very hard not to cry. He was not entirely succeeding. "Hey," Claire said, to the baby, to her daughter. The small face scrunched in the specific way of newborns encountering sound, then relaxed. "Hey," she said again, softer. She had known the name for 3 days. She had kept a list of 20 names for weeks, crossing them off and adding others, circling and uncircling. 3 days ago she had known. She had not told anyone. She had carried it like something private and precious. "Nell," she said quietly. Her mother made a sound behind her. "Eleanor Diane Hartwell," Claire said. The room was completely still for a moment. Then Eleanor crossed to her daughter and put one hand on her shoulder and said nothing. She just stood there with her hand on Claire's shoulder and looked at this small new person. "Hartwell," Eleanor had noted. "Not Weston. Hartwell." "The hyphen would have been too complicated," Claire said lightly. Her mother almost laughed. Maxwell crossed from the wall. He stood at Claire's side and looked down at his niece, his expression still doing that thing she didn't have a word for. Ferocity and tenderness in the same breath. The look of someone who has just understood that they will do anything for a person they met 30 seconds ago. "Hi," he said to Nell, very quietly, as if they were being formally introduced. Nell's unfocused eyes shifted in the direction of his voice. "She already knows you're important," Claire said. "She'd better," he said. "I'm funding her education." Claire laughed. A short, real, surprised laugh that hurt slightly because she had just given birth, and she did not care at all. She looked at Nell's face. She thought about the night of the slap, 4 weeks ago. Sitting in her car in the dark with the windows fogging, the house lights blurring behind her, not yet understanding what had shifted, not yet ready to understand. She thought about 3:47 in the morning, the refrigerator humming, the heat cycling off, the specific silence of a house where the truth has arrived and you are not yet ready to let it in. She thought about Maxwell arriving at her door with Thai food and a rolling suitcase and the quiet, focused expression that meant he was already working on her behalf. She thought about Diane's folder of evidence, 2 years old, kept out of loyalty and love and the impossible hope of being wrong. She thought about Rachel Ford's conference room and Garrett's eyes on the table, and the moment she had looked at him clearly without softening herself and held her own gaze steady. She thought about Amber and a cup of coffee and a folder of documents and an apology freely given. She thought about us assembling the crib alone on the nursery floor, testing each joint, finding it solid. She thought about her mother's thumb wiping her face, the particular, unsentimental tenderness of it. She thought, I lost something real, something I had genuinely loved and genuinely believed in. That loss is real, and I am allowed to grieve it for as long as I need to. And I found something more real underneath it. Something that was always there and that I had been covering over with accommodation and performance, and the fear of knowing what I already knew. She had found herself. Not a better self, not a stronger self, herself. The actual one, without the performance, without the stage set, without the constant management of someone else's comfort at the expense of her own truth. She looked at Nell. I am going to give you everything, she thought. Not things, not a life without difficulty or loss or 3:47 in the morning, everything real. She would show her daughter what it looked like to stand up, what it looked like to know your own worth with or without someone else's confirmation, what it looked like to cry in the dark and still get up at 7 and make tea and keep going, what it looked like to choose yourself, even when it cost you something, especially then. Garrett had sent a text the previous week. I hope things are okay. I want to be involved. I mean that. She had read it several times. She had thought of many things she could say. She had responded, when Nell is here and Rachel has finalized the custody schedule, we go from there. I want you to be her father. She needs you to be a good one. I hope that's what you choose. He had responded, I'll try. She had held her phone and looked at those 2 words. She had thought, trying is all any of us have. It will have to be enough. Whether it is will be proved over years, not messages. She had put the phone down. She had gone back to assembling the crib. In the hospital room now, the morning was coming. It came through the window in a long slant of winter light. December sun, low and golden. It moved across the wall slowly, the way it did in the short days of December. Brief, touching things lightly, she watched it move. She thought about the slap, sharp, flat, final. She thought that was the beginning. Not of something terrible, of something true. She had spent 4 years in someone else's story, and then a woman had struck her in a dining room, and her husband had not moved, and every truth she had been refusing to know came flooding in all at once. And here she was, 4 weeks and 18 hours of labor later, with her daughter on her chest and her mother's hand on her shoulder, and her brother standing watch against the wall, his eyes finally quietly, openly full, and a future that looked nothing like the one she had planned, and was somehow the precise shape of the life she was meant to have. She had not arrived at revenge. She had arrived at something better. She had arrived at herself. She pressed her lips to the top of Nell's head. The baby smelled like something brand new, like the very beginning of a story. You came into the world in winter, she said quietly. That's all right. Winter is honest. Everything stripped down to what's actually there. She felt the warmth of her daughter breathing against her. But spring is coming. It always does. The morning light moved slowly across the wall. The clock read 4:49, a Tuesday, her daughter's day now, and hers. She held on.